6.35 BMW. Quickest ever time, 53.8. Alongside him, Peter Brock from Victoria, a 54.34. On the second row of the grid, New Zealand's Robbie Francevic in the Volvo Turbo in the under 3 litre car. Surprisingly, fourth position has gone to Peter Williamson and Charlie O'Brien from Queensland. Absolutely flying in the Supra, 54.56. Row 3 consisting of Colin Bond and Greg Hansford in the Alfa Romeo. They're sharing the third row with Steve Masterton in the Commodore. The fourth row consists of Sydney's Alan Grice having his first competitive run in the Alfa Romeo, and alongside him, New Zealand combination Kent Bagent and Neil Lowe. The fifth row of the grid, Tony Longhurst in the BMW, alongside him, John Harvey, David Parsons from Tasmania. Rounding out the top 12, John Smith in the Corolla, and the Bob Holden, Mike Quinn combination in the Sprinter. And in fact, there's something like another 12 competitors further down the grid rounding out the top 24. In fact, the cars are getting right onto the line now. The tension building, they're set to go.
And we'll be bringing you race cam pictures from Tony Longhurst's BMW. There's been drama already as Alan Grice has pulled off the racetrack in car number 26, the white Alpha. This was to be Gricey's first run in the Alpha here at Amaroo Park for the Endurance Championship, so not a good start in the Toy Shop Alpha, Pat Welsh.
Michael, no, I noticed Alan Grice was very, very late onto the starting grid itself.
And there's a wheel straight off. I think Robbie Francevic's car has hit the bank, and Francevic has dropped a front wheel off. Now, this is going to be a big moment for organisers, whether they're going to give Francevic time to try and get the wheel back on or let the race go. He's not in the best spot.
What a sensational start. First Alan Grice pulling over to the infield, and now Robbie Francevic, one of the favourites for the race. And I know certainly fancying his own chances in this race is looking very, very disconsolate. There's the wheel that flew high into the air, and there's Francevic, a very disappointed man. The race has not even started.
There's the pit crew, but there's not much they're going to be able to do unless they're going to let them run up, put the wheel on and bring the car back in to the pits. Actually, I would think where the car is sitting at the moment is not the safest spot on the racetrack anyway. The marshals have arrived on the scene, and I think perhaps they've been in contact. Francevic, there's not much point of Francevic driving anywhere. He's just going to bury the front end and look like a plough at this stage.
Well, down on the starting line just prior to the 155 laps, and very interesting, in fact, because the sun has really started to come out here at Amaroo Park, and in fact it's starting to get very, very hot, and I just wonder what that may do to tyre wear. But just while we've got a moment before the cars get away on their warm-up lap, first of all we might have a quick yak to Peter Brock. And Peter, you must be exceptionally happy with the way the car qualified, particularly in view of the fact that it's something like half a second quicker than it previously was.
Yes, I was. Also, it seems to be lapping consistently, that sort of speed improvement, so it augurs well for a more competitive Commodore.
I haven't really had a chance to talk to you about the changes on the car. You're obviously very happy with the way they've worked out.
Yes, I think that everything we hoped would give us some sort of advantage or increase the speed of the car has worked to our expectations.
I just said a few moments ago when I first opened up on this piece that it's getting a little bit warmer here. Do you think that's going to play any kind of negative part in tyre wear this afternoon?
Yeah, I've got no doubt about it. It is getting warm, and tyre wear and probably the temperatures of gearboxes, diffs and what have you, which has always been the Achilles heel of long-distance races here in the past. A lot of transmission failures. I'd see that hiding up a bit, yeah.
What about for the driver? 155 laps. You're one of the people who's not getting out of the car. I notice you've got the hose on here for a quick drink. It's going to be hard work, Brocky.
I think I need a 44-gallon drum of water in the car for this sort of length. Yeah. It's going to be a long haul.
All right, well, I think it's better for you to be in there than me, and I wish you the very best of luck this afternoon.
I think we should swap places this afternoon.
Yeah, OK, you're on. Thanks, Peter.
The Australian Endurance Championship, the Battlebrakes 300 from Sydney's Amaroo Park Raceway. They're racing off the line. It'll be Brocky, and it is Brocky. Grabs two gears, he's off and running. Masterton makes a blinder of a start. Williamson made a terrible start. Masterton now ranges up alongside Richards, who's trying to fend him off as they go up over the top of Nissan Skyline for the first time. And they'll now drop into the loop area where Masterton gets the short back and sides from Jim Richards. Parsons goes in there very wide indeed and doesn't pay the penalty, but as they come out and work onto the back straight away, it is Peter Brock in the 05 Mobile Commodore who will lead down to the left-hander at Honda Corner, second spot being held by Jim Richards, third place by Steve Masterton, and then back behind them, of course, it's Colin Bond, Coming up very quickly through the field is Tony Longhurst in the BMW 323, and Peter Williamson, who made a terrible start, is also just zipped down the outside of Longhurst as they reach the lake corner.
And very interesting to see that Alan Grice has taken his place in the field. You remember before the Francevic drama that we saw Alan Grice actually pull over to the infield. He was very late on the starting grid and then pulled over to the infield with obvious troubles with the car, but he has taken his place in the field. And of course, Neil, the best starter, I suppose, apart from Brock, had to be Masterton, who came up from 6th spot. He's currently holding down 3rd. A great start by Masterton.
Great job from Masterton, and bear in mind that Steve's car is still in the 5-litre configuration, which means it weighs something like 1,400 kilograms, 4-speed gearbox, whereas Brock is using the smaller capacity engine and about 1,325 kilograms. So for a bigger, heavier car, and a car that frankly is not geared quite as well as Brock's car, he got away brilliantly.
I think you raised a very valid point out there on the starting grid too, just before the race began. As with the heat around today, which not too many of us expected, it's going to take a great toll on tyres and other mechanical parts in the car, isn't it?
It certainly is, and you heard what Brock's thoughts were on that. The temperature is going to play some kind of negative role in his race, without doubt. So, up to the top of Pitcher Pave again. Brock leading from Richards. In 3rd position, it's still Steve Masterton. And I believe that recovering a bit of lost ground at present is Peter Williamson in car 77. As Michael said before, an absolute dreadful start in the car. They did a lot of hurried work last night on that vehicle, so I hope that all goes well for them.
Just repeating that news that Robbie Francevic on the first of the warm-up laps lost a wheel, and at this stage is still out of the race. The Volvo is parked over the back of the circuit. There's been frantic efforts to get another wheel to him, and Francevic must be a very disappointed man.
Well, at the moment, of course, keeping in mind this is not a sprint race, this is an endurance race, and the drivers will treat it that way. There is no way these guys are going to go out all the way.
Grice in trouble there, Mike, in car 26, coasting up along the side of the wall. There's Williamson 77. So Grice in real strife very early in the race. Don't know whether he missed a gear and whether he's pulling into the pits or not, but we saw him in the back of shot there just coasting along.
Let's recap what's been happening for you. Peter Williamson, after a terrible start, has come back through the field. He dropped out almost to 10th spot. Now he's honed in on the back of David Parsons in the second of the dealer team cars, John Harvey and Parsons, to share this car here this afternoon. So Peter Williamson is back to put pressure on the Commodore. Just ahead of him, you can see Colin Bond in car number 27, and through on the inside that time went Peter Williamson in 77. He is the big mover. Meantime, up at the front, the scrap still continues between Peter Brock leading the race and Jim Richards in car number 62. Willow in 77 making up a lot of ground as he hones in now on car number 27, which of course is the Alpha driven by Colin Bond.
You're saying Willow's the big mover. He was the big mover yesterday at practice, qualifying in 4th position at a time of 54.56, which was under a second behind that sensational lap time of Jim Richards of 53.8. But Williamson certainly the real surprise in practice. And speaking to him yesterday, Neil, he said new tyres on the car has helped his performance greatly.
Watching Peter Williamson here, car 77, getting right stuck into the back of Colin Bond in 27, the Luigi Italian-built V6 Alpha. And the Toyota is flying down on the inside for the left-hander at Honda, and Peter Williamson goes through in car 77. Bond back on the outside once again. It'll be a desperate duel as they go down towards the right-hander at the stop corner. This will be a sense, and here comes Parsons in car 7. Almost locks the front right, the wheels slowing right up as he dived underneath Colin Bond. Kent Bagent in the background. In fact, Neil Lowe's in the car. It's the Kent Bagent BMW. So in 3rd placing, it's Masterton. 4th is Williamson. 5th, the Bond Alpha. And Willow driving like a man possessed. The car absolutely flying. They used English Dunlop tyres earlier in the season. Then they were switched to Japanese tyres. They're now using Avons. And the car is absolutely honking. He flew at Oran Park until a flywheel dropped off the car. Yesterday, he cracked the front left-hand disc brake quite badly in the discretionary practice late in the afternoon, and also popped a clutch in the first session of practice, but feels now that it's all underway. In fact, when Charlie O'Brien was qualifying the car in the second session of practice, he was the fastest man. Here's the leader, Peter Brock, on the brakes to the right-hander, and it'll be brakes and tyre wear and pit stops that determine the outcome of this race. You can absolutely be guaranteed of that. Brock, at this point in time, will be trying very hard to be conservative on the car. You saw the pit board then, 55.6. So there's well, what, a second and a half off their crack qualifying pace. So the situation...
Sorry, Neil, I was saying as they come over the top of the hill, Brock appears to have got a break on Richards. It's only a very, very small break indeed at this stage as they head down towards the back part of the course. But the 05 car, after sharing the front row with Jim Richards, has gone through. So Peter Brock in 05 leads round 1 of the Australian Endurance Championship from Sydney's Amaroo Park.
There's Williamson into the pits. So obviously a slow start and then a sensational comeback by Williamson, but things have gone amiss, and Williamson disappointingly has gone into the pits after only 3 or 4 laps, 7 laps in fact, of this race.
Well, here's race cam that we take now in Tony Longhurst, BMW 323. Tony is the dark horse in today's field. Don't expect to see him up amongst the leaders for at least another, well, 40 or 50 laps.
So that was the important point, wasn't it? You mentioned this is not a sprint race. The Touring Car Championship is all over. They've got to go 155 laps of this circuit. It's a long way in this heat.
That's quite correct. And you'll see how quick, in fact, this car runs late in the day. 7th at the moment on the racetrack is Tony Longhurst in car number 23. There's the sign as you go up over the top. And let's go down to Neil Crompton now in the pits.
Thank you very much, Mike Raymond. Well, at the moment, I've got a very disconsolate Peter Williamson with me at the present time. Peter, any indication as to what the problem is with the car?
Lost power. And I've got no indication, and the clutch slipped badly on the line, but I'm suspicious that the clutch exploded, and that's what the problem is. But if you're looking for misfiring in the engine, I really think it's an out of balance condition.
So it is a misfire, or in fact just dropped some sort of horsepower?
It's just won't rev, and I'm sure it's the clutch is gone.
All right, Peter, we'll let you get back to work. Thanks for talking to us. Better luck later on this afternoon.
13 laps into the first round of the Australian Endurance Championship, and just look at this scrap with Steve Masterton just ahead of David Parsons in car number 7, and moving up quickly to join them. We've noticed over the last few laps New Zealander Kent Bagent dropping into Dunlop Loop, and Parsons has been getting very, very close indeed to Masterton's car. Masterton driving the number 2 machine coming out of Dunlop Loop. And Parsons has signalled for the last couple of laps that he is very, very quick through this part of the course. And they're certainly going to make it very hard on Masterton, whose car today is running in the old Group A trim. It's a much heavier model than the number 7 car, which obviously Parsons is be able to find very competitive here. Coming down now towards the lake corner, and caught out wide just marginally is Masterton, and here's Parsons under brakes and will take him. That takes him cleanly too. So David Parsons, with some good driving, has now gone through to take Steve Masterton, and it looks almost as if he's going to take Kent Bagent with him through. So Masterton drops off the pace as David Parsons makes his charge towards the leaders in the Australian Endurance Championship Round 1 from Amaroo Park. The first drivers out of the race today, of course, was Alan Grice having his first up start in the Toy Shop Alpha number 26. And Alan is in the pits and with Neil Crompton.
Thank you very much, Mike Raymond. Yes, indeed. Alan Grice did come to the pits very early, in fact, far too early, about 3 laps into the race. Alan, what happened with the Toy Shop Alpha?
We had 5 forward neutrals and 1 reverse neutral coming out of Honda in third. Before a gear change or anything in the middle of the gear, and just the gearbox exploded, and I tried all the others, but there were none there, which is a shame. I thought the car was going quite well.
There was apparently some kerfuffle just prior to the start of the event on the warm-up lap. You were in some sort of strife.
We were very marginal on getting right through the race without using fuel, so I only did 1 warm-up lap, so we were looking to go through without stop.
Thanks, mate. Alan Grice out of the event after 3 laps of the Toy Shop Alpha. Here's Mike.
Thank you, Neil. 6th place is being held by Steve Masterton in the Masterton Homes 2WS Commodore. And in 7th place and carrying race cam for us today is Tony Longhurst in the BMW 323. Carrying race cam, as I said, are moving right in now behind Steve Masterton. Masterton goes a little wide there in the loop, and look at Longhurst putting the pressure on. Little skatey in the tail. Now down the inside, making a beautiful run here as they come to Mazda Corner. And Tony Longhurst, the man that we all thought would be the giant killer in this race, is in fact proving to be just that. He's taken 1 more through the field and will now go scalp hunting in the direction of Colin Bond next.
That's right, he is the quite Mike Raymond tip for the Better Brakes 300, isn't he? Tony Longhurst carrying Channel 7's race cam. in the smaller of the BMWs, the BMW 323. Queenslander Longhurst doing it slowly, methodically, but moving up the field very, very well, driving very smoothly indeed.
There's one with a problem in car number 24.
Gerald Kay in the Commodore.
The split between our race leader, Peter Brock, and Jim Richards opened up to about 2.5 seconds at one stage. It is now down to 0.71 of 1 second. So Jim Richards, the big mover in the Touring Car Championship, is zeroing in on the tail of the 05 Commodore as they exit the loop and now work down towards Mazda Corner.
And one problem for these two gentlemen is going to be traffic already, although, as I said, we're only 25 laps into the race, that these two big cars are starting to gather in slower cars in the race. They're going to run into quite a few problems as this race progresses, trying to weave their way through the traffic on this very tight Amaroo Park circuit.
It's not the most ideal racetrack for an endurance event, and not wishing to be critical at all of the ARDC, it's just a very hard racetrack on cars. In fact, the drivers work the adrenaline out here in a sprint race in an enduro, and they have to play all the cards right, the tyre wear, the fuel consumption, and this man, how to contend with him. The winner of 7 of 10 races to capture the Australian Touring Car Championship, an absolute unbeaten score in every race here throughout the Better Break Series at Amaroo Park, and he is now up to tackle Peter Brock. Now, whether Brock has got enough to be able to hang on with, but Richards is going to put it to him as they come down the back part of the course, and Gentleman Jim is through and takes Peter Brock on the inside. So Jimmy Richards, after 24 laps, now goes through to lead the first round of the Australian Endurance Championship. Second place is being held by Peter Brock in the 05 car.
And there's Frank Gardner, would be a very happy man with both his cars circulating very well here at Amaroo Park.
There's the shot from race cam, the Dunlop loop. Oh, this is brave. Oh, through on the inside of Ken Matthews. And Longhurst really takes some copybook lines around this circuit. And you can see, as you said before, Mike, the Alpha of Colin Bond just lurking up there in the distance as he comes down to the left-hander at the stop corner.
Well, I think you'll notice that that he has closed markedly since we've been following Longhurst around, because a few moments ago the back of the Alpha GTV6 was more a speck in the distance. Yeah. Now it is very much filling his windscreen.
Obviously have a lot of our Queensland viewers through BTQ following his progress here today. The gap, incidentally, between Jim Richards, who leads the race, and Peter Brock has opened from 0.71 of a second to 2:03. So over 2 seconds now, the gap. So Richards is just pulling away marginally from Peter Brock as this great scrap continues. Colin Bond in the Alpha GTV, number 27, and of course Tony Longhurst in the BMW.
It's interesting that Tony Longhurst actually held the record for Amaroo in 1983, I should say, with Colin Bond, but then he is now about to gather in, and has been gathering in at a great rate of knots in the last couple of laps, as you can see now from our shots outside the BMW 323, that he is closing on Bond very, very quickly.
The gap now 1.2 seconds, and Longhurst has gone past the brand new Commodore being driven by Bob Stevens and Mike Bergman. Here's Bond in the left-hand drive Alfa Romeo. I think Longhurst might be in a little bit of strife just at present. The car, car number 30 in trouble, and that was the car that was circulating very quickly at the hands of Tony Cabbage and Ralph Radburn. It's the ex-Alan Grice car from last year's Bathurst, and it looks to have taken, no, I was going to say it's taken a nerf in the right-hand door. It's just trying to get out at present, but they were circulating extremely well.
That is not the place to park.
No, they're in 8th position prior to this drama. Gap between Richards and Brock, by the way, is 6.9 seconds. And there is Richards going through on his teammate in the JPS cars. So he lets him go through cleanly.
And I think you'll find now that Longhurst is really shrewd. He'll tuck in behind Richards and let Richards do the work for him. Bond will give way to Richards, and he'll get the tailgate all the way through.
The little car is absolutely terrific through this part of the course, and he should be able to get right in behind Jim. You can see the extra advantage of the horsepower from the 3.5 litre 6-cylinder fuel-injected BMW, just pulling away a little. Locks a front left. Bond does the right thing and allows the race leader to go through. In fact, that was particularly polite from Bondy.
He's making him do it the hard way, right around the outside. Longhurst arrives. A bit too late for that. He couldn't get the run through that corner, so we're back to the scrap again with Tony Longhurst and Colin Bond. But that means now that Jim Richards has put a lap on Longhurst.
Whilst all that was happening, Richards managed to stretch his lead out to 8.9 seconds.
And Brock has got problems. Peter Brock in problems, coming into Dunlop Loop. Comes down the back straight, and I think Brock might be headed to the pits. It was his intention to go full race distance by himself. And his second car, being driven presently by David Parsons, to be co-driven by John Harvey.
Always prophets of doom, we commentators, but a little bit of blue smoke out from underneath the car again on that occasion, Michael. We've seen that a few times this year, and there always seems to be something just a fraction suspect about the back left-hand side of this car. He's had a couple of deflating rears, once at Calder, the car pitching and wobbling once again.
This is where Brock came in the same time at last year's race. And here comes Peter Brock into the pit area. We'll see what happens down in the pits. Pat Welsh's trackside to tell us exactly what is happening.
Peter Brock, any problems at all, Peter? Any problems at all?
No, it's fine, that's all.
So the car is going perfectly okay?
I've got tyre problems, that's all.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. Peter Brock with a tyre problem, if looks could kill. So that is not good news. With 100 laps still to go for Peter Brock, a tyre change back out onto the racetrack. And as he does, picking up race cam now as Tony Longhurst is getting closer and closer to Colin Bond. They've been disputing this place almost for 15 laps now. Bond coming down towards the right-hand kink at Mazda corner, down through the gears to the left-hander at Honda now. I think, Neil, this is the closest we've seen Longhurst to the back bumper for a couple of laps.
Yes, he's getting stuck right into it now, Mike, and looks, claws up onto the outside of Bond in 27. He got to within around about 2 seconds and seemed to maintain the gap and hung there for about 10 laps, and now seems to be able to make a move. Look at Bondy getting all out of shape as they come out of the stop corner. In fact, I think Longhurst has managed to get through at Wonderlick. Finally, after a very, very hard drive, it's Tony Longhurst who moves up one spot in car number 23. Masterton opted for the Dunlop 021 compound, which was the hardest possible available compound that he could get for today's race. There's only one harder and they weren't available. This car still in the 5-litre configuration, 1,400 kilograms, and producing about 320 brake horsepower. They've done a lot of testing, in fact over 300 laps split between Oran and Amaroo Park in the last couple of weeks, and coming up here onto the back of car number 24, one of the new Commodores in the race. Oh, and round goes Gerald Kay, and that was timely. He's being helped by Peter Fowler from Shepparton in the preparation of this car. Has been campaigning smaller capacity touring cars for quite some time. The car has taken a great load of fuel into it. As you can see, it's running rich, the black smoke coming out of it as he tries to restart it. Got a bit of a fright there as Masterton came whizzing up on the inside of him.
The interesting part of the race now is Peter Brock tries to pull a lap back on Jim Richards. At the same time, ahead of Richards. Richards is about ready to put a lap on Kent Bagent. But so Peter Brock is actually picking up the second-placed man. Very, very quickly indeed. About 3 seconds the gap between them. There's Bagent just going through. So Richards coming up to put a lap on the second-place driver in the field. And, of course, Peter Brock trying to take back his lap on Jim Richards and pass Bagent at the same time for second place.
Well, Mike, as you mentioned, it could be very interesting if Brock can manage to keep the Commodore going for the rest of the race now and doesn't have to bring it in, although, as we know, he came in on about lap 50, leaving him about 105 laps to go. So that's a lot to ask of fuel and tyres in the Commodore.
I think Brock would be more than happy to force Jim into a bit of concrete bashing and folding the rim.
The pit board that was sent out to Peter Brock on that lap signified a lap time the previous time around of 57.8. So already he's managed to sufficiently wear tyres to drop off the pace by about 1 second. So as you've mentioned, Brock just one lap down on Richards, who clearly leads at the moment. Bagent, in fact, in second with Neil Lowe at the wheel of the BMW. Brock in third. Jim Richards actually went to Le Mans with Peter Brock. This will be fun. Oh,
Oh, he's going to have a big shot down here on the outside. And will he make it? Yes, I think he has. He's caught out wide. We'll see what Jim's got left in the horsepower department as they come down to the late corner. Brock has taken back that spot, that lap, at this stage. but he yet has to clear Kent Bajan to pick up second in the race. So Richards is your race leader, Kent Bajan, and the white BMW number 3 is second. Well, Neil Lowe driving that car, I must say. And Peter Brock in car 5 in third. They are on the same lap. One lap down in fourth place is Tony Longhurst. Fifth place held, of course, by Colin Bond of the Alpha, and sixth place by David Parsons in car number 7. So the top running 3 on the same lap, and Jim Richards has yet to pit, and problems for Tony Longhurst in car number 23. He's pinched tyre. Is it on the rim again? He's just been touched by another car, so he will head to the pits, and they will try and pull the coachwork off. Touched with another Commodore, could have been the 24 car.
So the JPS team now faced with the logistical nightmare of having 2 cars in the pits. There's Jim Richards in 62, and they won't be expecting Longhurst at all. They won't know about the problem. Frank Gardner's going to have a heart attack when he looks up and sees this. 4 tyres and fuel to go on the Richards car. Now he's been made aware of it, I would say. Where are they going to put the 23 car? There's no room. I think they've only got one spot there at present.
Frank has just given them the idea to get on with it, because all Longhurst will require is one tyre, and to pull the rip off the tyre where it is caught. This has opened the race up tremendously, because Peter Brock, who has been closing on Neil Lowe in car number 5, Neil Lowe now goes through to take over the lead, going up to the top of Bitchapave Hill. Here's Tony Longhurst. Frank Gardner dispensing a little bit of advice there. New tyres for the car.
And they're having trouble trying to locate the back right onto the centre hub. Well, Longhurst will be very disappointed, holding down outright 4th position and the leader of the under 3 litre class up to lap number 85. So the JPS team getting a little bit wobbly now in the latter stages of the event. Longhurst pulls back out, and that's a moment that Gardner could ill afford, having 2 cars in the pits at once. So the new leader at this point in time is number 3, Neil Lowe.
And I tell you what, Neil,
in fact, I'm just sitting here doing some sums at the moment. I'm not quite sure that is the case. I think that Richards might still have about half a lap on Neil Lowe. He's just gone past our commentary point here in the main straight, and there is Neil Lowe. So I guess the gap at present somewhere in the order of around about 11 or 12 seconds, and Peter Brock right behind the BMW. So we now have quite a decent race on our hands.
Well, Frank Gardner, after everything going so smoothly for the BMW team, everything happened at once here, didn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It never rains till it pours, but there you are. It's only a sport.
It was obviously a regulation pit stop for Jimmy.
Yeah, it was a regulation one, and at the same time Tony came in with a puncher.
So were you planning to bring Tony in at all during this race?
No, we weren't planning to bring Tony in, no. So all the best laid plans go astray. No, Tony was designed to stay up there for the whole of the race. That was the strength in the motor car, was to run all the way through, but of course you don't budget for punches.
And the scrap continues between Neil Lowe in car number 3 and Peter Brock in 05. Brock looking to take back 2nd place, and they've been having a heave too for the last lap or so. Brock going to the outside. He's looking for a tight... Now he's going to go right round the outside by the look of it. Neil Lowe comes out of the corner. I don't think it's still on before Neil Lowe's due to go to the pits. And Brock's
he was one of the fellows that was talking about making it all in one hit. So Brock goes round now and rounds up 2nd placing.
So that puts Brock behind Richards, back to 2nd. And Lowe, if he does intend going all the way, might be starting to show a little bit of tyre wear, because he's really been hooting along in the BMW number 3. 92 laps completed in the first round of the Australian Endurance Championship, the Better Breaks 300 from Sydney's Amaroo Park. A fine showing here today by Jim Richards in car number 62, the present Australian Touring Car Champion, and the man who goes to the James Hardy 1000 with a lot of hopes pinned on him, particularly by BMW stalwarts. But of course the team that obviously will be the one to beat at the James Hardy 1000 this year is the Jaguar team, and they have already been preparing for the race for many, many months.
In the Toyota Corolla, car number 10, the 1.6 litre twin overhead cam entry, which is currently 8th on the circuit and leads the under 2 litre class. A great performance so far from Smith, who qualified up in the top dozen cars. The man who partnered Peter Williamson to an under 2 litre class win at Bathurst in 1981. Of course, extremely successful in open wheelers. The Formula 4 Driver to Europe champion. Also finished second to Roberto Marino in the 1983 Australian Grand Prix. Second in the Australian Gold Star in that same year. And listen to the revs from the little car as it's still on song, exactly the way that it started the event. About 850 kilograms, a very light little car, and surprisingly produces about 180 brake horsepower out of a very small power plant. As I said before in our coverage, this weekend being in the same team as Ray Cutchy, car number 11, which is the Toyota Sprinter that John Smith campaigned earlier this season. No great dramas in the lead-up, although they were a little concerned with their tyre wear. They've elected for the Dunlop 399 compound for today's race, and they were hoping to try and get through in one hit, although this particular car, fairly quick and although fairly light, is particularly hard on its tyres when you give it a real punting like Smith is doing.
Race leader Jim Richards 18.88 seconds ahead of Peter Brock in 05, but Brock holding second only over 17.36 seconds to Neil Lowe.
It sounds dreadful, Mike. There's a real knock in the engine. And Brock saying a few words.
Doesn't look the happiest of drivers at this moment. Was up to second. John Harvey.
I remember seeing something like this before at Bathurst a few years ago. Remember they all jumped under the bonnet when they heard something, and in actual fact it turned out to be a minor problem, and Brock was most concerned that they didn't get on with the tyre and fuel stop. That's very important. I guess the aim of the exercise is to get those tyres on, get the fuel in, and then deal with the problem if there is one. But it's very hard when you don't have radio communication. Wayne now dives under the bonnet of the front of the Commodore. It's making a dreadful noise. Had a motorbike like that once. Oh, it's in bad shape. Brock's still screaming.
I'm not sure if he is... I think he's given up. He's either going to just take off again. He's had a chat to the pit crew members.
Well, Neil Burns, the chief engine man, really standing back there, not knowing just what to do for Peter Brock. He was certainly having his few words, how to win friends and influence people, eh?
Well, it didn't sound well at all coming up the straight, sounded horrible. But Peter Brock, after being able to get some message through to his pit crew...
He dropped about 1 minute 15 seconds in that exercise, Mike. Peter Brock in the pits having some heated discussion, and there goes a wheel off. I think Masterton's car up at the Dunlop loop. The front right has come off, coasting along on the disc brake. Oh, he was very lucky to get out of that. Very, very lucky, because it's an extremely dangerous part of the course, and Masterton now wisely pulls the car off to the infield and on the dirt, and that puts paid to what has otherwise been quite a good performance from Masterton as the wheel rolls to a stop. He was in 7th position.
Through the lake corner, and David Parsons, little scaly in the tail, but here he comes, coming in for his pit stop. Running second on the racetrack at the moment is Parsons, and we'll see what sort of a pit stop and how long it takes as John Harvey prepares to take over the car for the final 20 or so laps of this event.
Right, we've got the watch on him. Parsons very quickly out.
The duel for second and third spot, with Brock trying desperately now to hold off the BMW 635 of Kent Bajan. It was set up beautifully by Neil Lowe, who drove it for much of the race. Kent Bajan took over in a frenzied pit stop, and he's kept up the good work that Neil Lowe did. Now, as you can see, he is challenging the ailing Commodore of Peter Brock for second spot. The Better Brakes 300.
Well, a bit of a brake lock up that time from Kent Bajan, but he goes the outside route, coming down to the right-hander at Lake Corner, and Kent Bajan comes from behind, takes back second spot in the Endurance Championship round here at Amaroo Park. So there is the distinct possibility of a 1-2 finish now for BMW, not necessarily from the same team, but Kent Bajan and the Nilfisk BMW up to second. Jim Richards, the race leader. Peter Brock now drops to third place.
So all pretty quick circulating by those top three cars. And then we drop right down to the Peter Williamson entry, which pulled out after 6 laps, but he'd also lapped in the 55-second range. And the Commodore of Steve Masterton also had a 55-second lap. It lasted 106 laps before losing the wheel in quite spectacular fashion. So all 4 or 5 top teams recording lap times today that they'd be reasonably happy with, but I suppose the only one who'll be totally happy will be the BMW team with Jimmy Richards performing perfectly. And I think we're coming up to last lap. There we go. There's the board shown to Jim Richards. So Jim Richards is on the last lap of the Better Breaks 300, the first round of the Australian Endurance Car Championship.
Well, he's done it, I could say, easily. Tony Longhurst sitting in behind him, but Tony is back there in about 5th spot at the moment through Dunlop Loop, and now the exit down towards Mazda Corner. It's been a great opening race of the Touring Car Endurance Championship for Jim Richards. Goes through the right-hander at Mazda, still with a couple of laps up over second-placed Kent Bagent and Peter Brock, followed by John Harvey.
Followed then by Tony Longhurst, Colin Bond in the Alpha, John Smith in the Toyota, and rounding out the top 8 drivers, Ken Matthews. In fact, Terry Finnegan at the wheel of that car number 19, the Commodore.
Frank Gardner looks happy, and why shouldn't he be? His driver comes through the short straightaway to Wunderlich Corner. Out of the turn now, checkered flag is at the ready, and the Endurance Championship Round 1 BMW Power strikes again. 1-2 here today at Sydney's Amaroo Park. The win going to Jim Richards and the JPS BMW, car number 62. And receiving a tremendous ovation from the huge crowd in attendance here today at Sydney's Amaroo Park. Let's recap how they've finished in the Better Breaks 300. The win going to Jim Richards, JPS BMW. Second place goes to Neil Lowe and Ken Bagent in the BMW Nilfisk entry. And third place goes to Peter Brock in the Mobile Commodore.